Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining the Ney Israel and Raleigh Close series of Shirim. We're delighted this evening that Rabbi Portnoy will be speaking on Ayin Hara, Evil Eyes, Red String, and Voodoos. As most of you know, Rabbi Portnoy is Associate Rabbi at Raleigh Shul. Before that, he was Rabbi at Loughton Federation Shul. He holds a BSc in Psychology and Counseling, a master's degree in Jewish Education, and is also training to be a psychotherapist. She is dedicated to Nishmas Imam Morosile Bas Yitzchok, Zichrona Livracha. I hand over to you now, Rabbi Portnoy. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Susan, and thank you all for joining. I think the reason why I can't share my screen at the moment is because there was a screen being shared, but maybe that's now gone. Thank you to Susan and thank you to Nami. A huge yasher koach to you both for not only managing to bring two shuls together to do something with a bit of achdus, which is very special, but to keep it going for 23 years is really a remarkable achievement. And to keep it going through all of the COVID-19 pandemic is even more remarkable. And the fact that there's many of you on here tonight, when we're all, let's be honest, zoomed out, and there are some amazing programs coming out of all four corners of the earth from every single community, continent, shul. We're very spoiled in some ways. We're missing the human contact, and please God, we're seeing the end of that. But it's a real privilege to be able to share some Torah thoughts with you on tonight's topic, which, as Susan just mentioned, is Ayin Hara, Evil Eyes, Red String, and Voodoos. It probably seems like a slightly strange topic, bearing in mind that we are approaching like Ba'omer, slightly later on, Shavuos, Pesach Sheni, almost upon us. We could talk about a lot of things, and I suppose what drew me, what inspired me to talk about Ayin Hara was the fact that we are in the period of the Sephira, and the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the Gemara in Shabbos, where he was escaping the Romans on fear of death, and he spent 12 years learning in the cave, surviving on the carob tree, and he then came out of the cave after 12 years and was somewhat disturbed by people engaging in seemingly mundane activities, daily routine, daily life chores that they had to do, and just with a glare, a simple stare with his very holy, inspired eyes, basically sizzled them into dust. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty, said to him, you know, you've been studying all this Torah for so long, and you've come out the cave to kill and destroy my world. Get back in the cave. So the power of the eye, the power that, or perhaps the power of the eye that may exist, may not exist, we'll look at tonight. It's really a fascinating subject. I don't think there's anybody really who's sort of, shall we say, parav on this subject. Everyone has a view on Ayin Hara. People are either very, very worried and nervous about Ayin Hara and go to great lengths to avoid Ayin Hara. I remember growing up in our home, my dad was always very careful not to celebrate birthdays, and particularly significant birthdays, before or even close to when those dates had occurred. For Ayin Hara, maybe the person would not be able to achieve and get to those milestones. If a baby was born, I'm one of 9, nothing was ever bought before that baby was brought into the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed the parents with, because Ayin Hara, maybe you're tempting the evil eye by having things there in the home when actually there's nothing to celebrate just yet. So we all have our ideas and views on Ayin Hara. I'm going to share my screen with you in a moment and look at some of the sources with you. If I'm allowed to, Susan, I just want to also dedicate tonight's shir Le'ilui Nishmas, one of my Rebbeim who recently was nifta, still his shiva, Harav Chaim Lipazei Rabinowitz, Harav Chaim Lipazei ben Harav Gedalia Rabinowitz, Zichrona Livracha, who was my headmaster at Manchester Jewish Grammar School. Anyone who's on here has noticed a few Mancunian faces as well. will know that Rabbi was a physically small man, but he was a giant. He was a spiritual giant, a huge Talmud Chacham, someone that when his car drove into Jewish grammar school, it didn't matter how cool or charismatic or, you know, where you were in the tier of the high school, everybody and absolutely everybody ran back to their classrooms as quickly as you could, because this was a man, an old school style Rebbe who just, you know, you were sort of awestruck, inspired by. Many would say they were terrified of him. I had the privilege after school to learn in his shir when I was in my first yeshiva Medrash Shmuel for 4 or 5 years. He gave a shir in Shari Chesed, and he really gave to me a love of learning, and he really inspired me to love learning like I had never really seen before in my school life. So it should be the Iloi Nishmasai, as well as to all those neshamas, Susan, that you mentioned. Just to get us going tonight, before we see some sources, when I was in Loughton a few years ago, the president of the shul came up to me and he said, "Rabbi, what's your take on Ayin Hara?" So I knew there was some subtext going on, and I said, "What's the story, Philip? What do you want to know? I mean, it's a complicated subject. Well, maybe I'll give a share on it one day." And he said, "I've had a call from a work colleague. He knew I was dabbling, as I do, in residential property, who's doing a development." Okay, where are they doing this development? They're doing it in Frodsham. Now, Frodsham is a very sort of rural place, probably an hour's drive from Manchester. And the only reason I knew Frodsham was because there was a school for special needs children called Delamere Forest School, which is no longer there. And this family were building, I think it was about 20 large homes on this large plot of land. Delamere Forest School suddenly closed. And they were having a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties in getting the development through. And one of the challenges that they were struggling with was the caretaker was very spooked out by lots of occurrences that were going on this large site. Things, doors closing, doors opening, they had planning issues, all kinds of things, which I suppose anyone who's in development will know are part and parcel of what goes on. But they were very nervous about going ahead with this plan for 20 homes. And he basically wanted someone Jewish. I was probably the president of the shul was probably the only Jewish person he knew, to come along and remove the Ayin Hara from the site. And I said, "Philip, I'm going to be honest with you. This is not really my cup of tea." And he pushed me. And I'd only been, I think, in Loughton 2 years at the time. I said, "Philip, look, I can go along. I can speak to them. We can, I was in Manchester fairly, regularly. I can have a look, but I really can't promise you anything. I don't want him to be disappointed that I've not managed to remove the Ayin Hara from this development site." To cut a long story short, I went along. I said to the fellow, "Look, this is a very, abnormal situation for me to be in. We can say some Tehillim." And there were some difficult stories that came out of landing Delamere Forest School when it was there. Some, really challenged, mentally challenged people. There were people that took their own lives. I said, "Look, we can say some Tehillim and we can hope for the best." And then as I left, he said, "Would you? You're a rabbi. Will you bless this development?" And I said to him, our religion doesn't believe in me having any power. I'm not a tzaddik. I'm not a Kabbalist. I can't bless the development. All I can tell you is that if you promise to give, a significant proportion of the profit to tzedakah, maybe Hashem will smile down favorably on this development." And it should. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it went well, this development, and all the houses were built and sold. I don't take any credit, but it was a very strange thing that here was not only someone who wasn't Jewish, but someone who wasn't, not religious, but not Jewish and not really religious at all, worried and disturbed about a development because of this concept of Ayin Hara. So we're not the only ones that think about Ayin Hara. There are many who think about it. And to get us going, I'm going to now share my screen. And let's look, as we always do when we discuss any topic, we look in the Torah. Where's the first time or the first source that something takes place in or around this this idea. So hopefully, if you can just give me a thumbs up to show me that you have seen what I've shared. Okay, thanks, Deborah. So let's look at the first time that we are told explicitly the concept, the idea of Ayin Hara. So, Vayashkem Avram Aboikar Ayikach Lechem V'Chem Asmayim, the famous story of Avram and Sarah and their inability to have children. Sarah says to Avram, I will give you my maidservant. And Avram is not happy with the child that is eventually born, Yishmael, and he sends them away. Okay. Now the pasuk is a strange pasuk because it says that he gave the, if you like, the urn of water to Hagar al Shechma on her shoulder. V'es hayeled. Why was the child on her shoulder? Presumably this child was not a baby. He should have been able to walk. So Rashi says, V'es hayeled al Shechma shehechnisa by Sarah Ayin Hara, because Sarah was struggling, she was in pain, she couldn't have children herself, she had all sorts of internal struggles going on, and she had negative thoughts. She used this power of Ayin Hara. This child was not able to walk on his own. It's quite a hard-hitting, quite a difficult source to see. Here was Sari Menu, the great matriarch of Klal Yisrael, of the Jewish people. She was in a lot of pain, she had a lot of tension and friction at home, and she was able to tap in, if you like, she was allowed to connect to Ayin Hara, and she inflicted this illness onto Yishmael that he couldn't walk, and therefore she had to put him over her shoulder. Now, the first time the Torah tells us that she was seen by the Malach, the Torah says, "Vayavay el Hagar vatar, va'umatamad loy mahina charav ilad." The Malach comes to Hagar and says, "Here you are, sent away. You're going to have a child." The first time that she was sent away, pregnant, because Sarah was annoyed with her before she had Yishmael. What was the cause of tension? Sarah said to Avram, "Here's my maidservant." Immediately, he lived with her as he would with his wife. She became pregnant, sent her, and this caused Sarah to subjugate her and to make her life miserable. And she left. She ran away. And the Malach comes and says, "You're going to, have a child." The first conception that she had with Avram, she lost the child. She had a miscarriage. Again, why? Because of Ayin Hara. So twice we see Sarah Imenu using and implementing and subjugating Hagar to Ayin Hara. Once to the point that she made her lose a child. Incredible thing to think about, how much pain that must have caused Hagar. Whether Hagar knew that it was through Ayin Hara or not, it's another subject for another time. And also that Yishmael couldn't walk. So we see quite clearly from these first two sources the idea of Ayin Hara being something very real, very powerful, and very destructive, very, very quite scary, quite frightening of what it can do. So moving along to looking for a precedent in halacha in Shulchan Aruch. This is a very well-known halacha which many people will know. One is allowed in theory to call two brothers to the Torah to have an aliyah, one after the other. And you can call the son after the father. Obviously the father should come first out of honor and kibbud av v'ein. Ve'ein manichem, but we don't do it, says the Shulchan Aruch, ela b'shvil Ayin Hara. So technically one could do it, but we don't. Why? Because people will sit in shul and they'll speak as they do in pre-COVID times without masks, and they'll say, look at this family, this chasha, this prestigious family. They're all up there on the bimmer, and they've got this and they've got that. Whatever people say when lots of people from the same family are honored in shul. and it can produce Ayin Hara. And continues the Shulchan Aruch. Even if there was a break technically between one of them being one of the 7 people who has an aliyah and one being maftir, again, we don't do it. Even if you're going to do that, and we need to for some reason, you don't call him by his name, because calling him by his name is symbolizing a sense of importance and gives him cover, it gives him honor, and therefore we don't do it because of Ayin Hara. So we're seeing a pattern here, quite a strong, more than a suggestion, an explicit statement, both in the Chumash and both in Shulchan Aruch, that Ayin Hara is a real thing, and we do need to be concerned about it. How we are to be concerned about it and how we can prevent it and why it comes, we'll see later on. What about within the Talmud? What about in Gemara? This is a very, very, again, frightening statement of the Talmud in Bava Metzia. I remember discussing with somebody whether Ayin Hara existed, actually family members, and one said, it's hocus pocus, I don't believe it, it doesn't exist. And the other one said, no, I've learned a share on this subject, and I'm telling you now, the Gemara says very clearly. So this is the Gemara in Bava Metzia. V'heiser Hashem imcha kol choli. In Parshas Eiket, Hashem is saying, if you keep the tone, you keep the mitzvahs, and you keep everything that I'm instructing you to do. Omar Rav, Zu Ayin Hara. What is this choli? What is this illness, this affliction that Hashem will remove from us? Rav says, you know what it refers to? It refers to Ayin Hara. It's not any of the terrible other illnesses that we know about. It's specifically Ayin Hara. Why? Rav the Tameh, Rav goes according to his own reasoning. The Rav, Solik Lebei Kivrei, he went and visited the graveyard. Many people around Elul and Rosh Hashanah, and some people like doing this through the year. Interesting what causes people to want to visit graveyards if they're not specific, if they don't have people there, but there are the grave hopper Jews. They went to visit the Beis HaKvoros, and Rav, Ovid Maida Ovid, he did what he did. He had this incantation, he said a few things, and then he said a very, very stark, difficult thing to understand. Omar, Tishim v'Teisha b'Ayin Hara, v'Echad b'Derech Eretz. 99 of the people that are in the Beis HaKvoros that have passed away, what's the cause of them passing away? Through Ayin Hara. And one, through Derech Eretz, through the normal means, natural means, old age, other illness, and so on and so forth. So without, looking beyond these sources, there are many, many other sources within Chumash, within Shulchan Aruch, and so on. 3 very clear examples of the power and the destructive ability of Ayin Hara. And if we just to close the show after tonight, we'd probably all go home quite nervous and quite worried, but stay on if you can. And we'll see that there are things that we can do to minimize and to reduce the impact that Ayin Hara has over us. Now, the Maharal of Prague, the chief rabbi of Prague, writing in the 16th century, speaks of Ayin Hara as being something which is almost a natural source of destruction. It's almost a force of nature. Ki Ayin Hara yesh lo koyach ishi soreif, u'mekabel ha'adam hazek min ha'mazik, asher yesh lo koyach ishi soreif, ki Ayin Hara soreif kamoi ha'esh hu soreif. Ayin Hara has an inherent, an intrinsic ability to destroy, to burn. And the person that exhibits this Ayin Hara causes destruction to the person who he's, if you like, zoning in on and forcing the Ayin Hara to go to. Why? Because Ayin Hara has that sort of kamoya. It's like fire. Just like fire is one of the elements and has the ability to destroy, so too does Ayin Hara. It's like a force of nature, if you like. It's not anything that we cause or we don't cause. It's something which exists, and through certain ways of triggering it, like if someone lit a fire, it can cause terrible destruction and kill and destroy. So too, Ayin Hara. At the moment, we are in the summer months where we have the special opportunity to study Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, in the long Shabbos afternoons. And Pirkei Avos is all about ethical behavior, human development, human character. Pirkei Avos is absolutely teeming with statements about Ayin Hara and the idea that Ayin Hara can do various things. Last week we said Pirkei Avos chapter 2. And Rabbi Yeshua says the following statements. Rabbi Yeshua, there are these three critical elements of, if you like, human character, which remove a person from the world. The first, Ayin Hara. The second, the Yetzer Hara, and the hatred of other human beings. There are various other statements, very similar statements in Pirkei Avos, Hakira v'Kavod, lust, jealousy, and seeking honor also remove a person from the world. But let's see a absolutely mind-blowing commentary of the Rabbeinu Yoina, who famously wrote Shari Teshuvah, the great, if you like, central sefer on how to do Teshuvah and what a person needs to do Teshuvah, writing not in 20th or even 21st century, the Western world, but writing as a relative of Nachmanides, of the Ramban, writing in Spain. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, very, very mind-blowing commentary on this Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Rabbi Yeshua says, the evil eye, its explanation is one who is not happy with his lot and places his eye on his fellow who is wealthier than he, thinking, when will I be as wealthy as the great wealth of this man? And this causes evil to himself and to his fellow. It is like the Chachamim say, the wise men of science say, about everything that is his neighbor. Vapor comes up from that thought and burns the things that he put his eye towards with an evil eye. He also burns himself inside, since he desires things, the thought of which he does not have the ability in his hand to materialize. He destroys his body, and as he shortens his spirit and removes it from the world. The power of jealousy, the power that one has if one does not, I suppose, marshal one's thought and have the right outlook and the right philosophy and the right approach to life, and one becomes jealous. A vapor, almost like a venomous snake, comes from the thoughts that are churning inside the mind of this person who is jealous. And basically, not only can he cause destruction to the person that has these things, but he can cause destruction to himself. It goes without saying that competition and the rat race and all these things are tremendously destructive. I recently had a conversation with someone from Northeast London who I was close to when I was there in Loughton, and he's not a religious fellow, but he's done well, and he's told all his children that they all have to live in Northwest London, because one thing he wants, like everybody wants, however religious or irreligious, he wants them to marry Jewish girls. He's got 3 boys, one's been in the Israeli army, and I said to him, so, Nu, when are you going to come? When are you coming this side of London? And he said to me, you know what? It's very competitive there. Everyone's looking at what everyone, Yenem had, he didn't say Yenem, but everyone's looking at what everyone else has, and it's a big rat race. And it struck me because in my mind, it was very much like that in Northeast London. But for them, for whatever reason, he thinks, or he felt or feels that this idea of everyone looking over their shoulder to see what everyone else has is very, very much prevalent. And this is Rabbeinu Yoina writing in the 13th century. So the idea of being aware of what's around us and being too focused on what other people have is clearly something which is not new, but it's something that we have to be very much aware of. Rabbi Sachs, Zichron Livracha, was always, had many, many amazing quotes. One of them was always the idea of always this endless need to acquire more physical possessions, that happiness is around the corner just after the next purchase. It's something that we need to bear in mind, but it's very much in the context of Ayin Hara, that if we're focused on what other people have and we don't feel happy for them, which is a problem, we should feel happy for them, then we can create a vapor which comes and destroys them and destroys ourselves. It destroys our the very core of who we are. Now, moving along to this idea that bracha, things which are blessings, should, some people say, well, why are people so flamboyant? Why does everyone have to see what everyone else has? So the Gemara says a very fascinating thing. Amar Yitzchak, Ein habracha metzuya ela b'dov ha'asum min ha'ayin shenemra, Yitzav Hashem itcha es habracha b'asamecha. That no blessing, no material blessing can become truly embedded, can become built into a significant foundation, can plant itself, unless it is samoy min ha'ayin, unless it's hidden from the eye. What's the quote? What's the proof that the Gemara says? Because Hashem says, I will instruct bracha upon you b'asomecha, in your storehouses. In other words, storehouses, people might see a physical building, but they don't see what's internal, or they don't see the actual the fruits, the vegetables, the grains, the things that in those days were the source of, or were the key way Hashem blessed someone materially. It's a hidden thing. And it's something that we need to think about when we think of Ayin Hara. It's not saying that we can't enjoy the brachas that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, but there is an idea that if bracha is to take root, if bracha is to take hold in our lives, maybe it should be ba'asomecha, maybe it should be somewhat slightly under the radar and not out there, not sort of screaming, look at me, look what I've got, look what I've achieved, etc. It reminds me of a famous story. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard it already. I apologize. With one of the freshwaters. I'm not sure if it was Rabbi freshwater or Rabbi Shlomo freshwater, who have made it onto various programs for being landlords in the UK, very significant landlords. And at one time, one of them was reversing out of Reb Chuna's and Golders Green Road in their car. And let's just say the driving around those parts is not the best. And he reversed into a very expensive looking BMW. And the fellow driving there was an African Caribbean fellow who got out, and he really started laying into this rabbi with his beard and the hat, and he said, Rabbi, you're going to be paying for this car for the rest of your life. Do you know what this car costs? And he obviously was driving out in an old Volvo, whatever it was. With Shlomo Freshwater, Rabbi Freshwater said, I apologize. I'm so sorry. What's it going to cost to replace the car or to repair it? The fellow told him, he took out a checkbook and he wrote the check and he said, here you go, have a good day. So this was somebody who could have bought this car however many hundred times. He was driving a less elaborate, luxurious car, which was probably worth not very much, keeping things under the radar. This fellow assumed that he didn't have much money. And actually, he had tremendous brachas and material blessings from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He chose not to necessarily show everybody that everything was about the car that he drove. Things should be sometimes less explicit, less in the public eye. Now, there's a very beautiful minhag that we do on Rosh Hashanah, and that is the minhag of tashlich. And people always wonder, why do we do tashlich at the water? If you go to many of the communities where I was before I was in Hendon, people take lots of bread and they feed the ducks and all the animals, which you're not supposed to do. But one of the reasons we do it by the water is because kings are coronated at the water. But also the Gemara says fish are a species that multiply enormously. They have hundreds and hundreds of babies. And the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, let me just move this down, sorry. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, Omar Mehacha, Vayiku Laroi B'Karev Aretz, the Hamalach HaGoyel, which many parents sing to their children before they put them to sleep at night. Yaakov Avinu blessed the tribes of Klal Yisrael that they should expand and grow and increase like the fish. Why like fish? What's special about fish? Yaakov could have blessed the tribes, the Shvatim, to be like ants. There are 500 trillion ants in the world. They increase just as much, maybe more than fish, and they don't get destroyed like fish do today. Why? What's special about fish? Says the Gemara, because fish exist in a vacuum, so to speak. They exist beneath that which the eye sees, and therefore the Ayin Hara shaletes b'hem, as Zara shel Yosef Ayin Hara shaletes b'hem. Therefore, like fish are not they cannot be affected by Ayin Hara, so too Clan Yisrael cannot be affected. Now, there's two ways that we can view this statement of the Talmud. Either that Jewish people are not able to be affected by Ayin Hara, which would go against some of the earlier sources we've seen, or that if we function at a level where we are not seeing, where we are beneath the water, so to speak, then Ayin Hara can have no power, no efficacy, no dominion, as the translation says there, over us. I once heard a beautiful idea about the idea of fish, why Yaakov Avinu blessed the Shvatim to be like fish. Fish are one of the few species in the universe that a fish has this ability to swim against the tide almost effortlessly, right? A fish doesn't think, oh, the tide's going this way, I'll turn around and follow the stream down that way. A fish will swim wherever it's swimming to. It can swim upstream, downstream. It's very easy to go with the flow, to go with what our friends are doing or society's telling us to do or the world around us to do. But to be Zera Yosef, to be a descendant of Yaakov Avinu, sometimes we have to make a difficult decision to sometimes swim the upstream, swim in reverse against the natural flow of the world and everything around us. So this Gemara is either saying that we are not suspect or we're not able to be affected by Ayin Hara, or we can avoid the power of Ayin Hara by swimming beneath the waves. Now, if you're a deep sea diver, that's great, but most people are functioning in a world where they are above the water, and people do look at them. So I think up to this point, we've seen Ayin Hara on many levels is definitely something which exists. It has tremendous power, destructive power, and we should be careful about it. Now, I suppose the question is, if everyone can see the source sheet, how can we prevent Ayin Hara taking effect on us as individuals? The concept is out there, the concept exists. The Maharal writes about it, it's written in Shulchan Aruch and the Gemara. How can we as individual people ensure that we are protected, we have a safety net, a security barrier against Ayin Hara affecting us? This is an amazing source from the Michtav Meliah, Rav Dessler, who the book was translated into Strive for Truth, a very, very popular book. Rav Dessler writes something amazing, which he's writing, as you can see, long before any of the challenging things that are out there today make this even more difficult for us in our generation today. So one that becomes wealthy should be sure to do a mitzvah with some of his money to prevent an Ayin Hara from damaging it. What exactly is this Ayin Hara, which is spoken about in so many different places? It is clear that if one causes his friend to become jealous of him, he is responsible and liable for the pain he has caused him. And this could even cause him to ultimately lose his wealth. He therefore needs to do mitzvot to protect himself from difficulties. So this is quite a hard-hitting section of Rav Dessler, that if someone is successful, someone has achieved material success in this world, he needs to be careful about gouging out the eyes of those around him, despite how well he's done. And it can even lead to him losing his own wealth. So how does he prevent that taking place? How does he prevent Ayin Hara having a negative implication on him? He should do as many mitzvahs as possible. Now, I would add to that, one should choose their friends wisely. If you have friends, or we have friends, or anyone has friends, where they get a feeling, a sense of, this person, they made comments, or I think maybe they're jealous, or maybe they really want what I have, then maybe those are not necessarily the best friends for someone to have, because those friends, who knows what's going on in their mind, in their thoughts, in their psyche, and maybe the things that they're thinking can cause one to be harmed. Of course, there's many mitzvahs we should do, but to think about who we're friendly with, and to ensure that we're surrounding ourselves, if you like, with good energy, with people who are just over the moon for what we have. They're delighted for us, and they're happy for us. And, that sounds like an easy thing, but, if your friend called you up and said, I've just won the lottery, if you're a decent friend, you'd probably be very happy for them. If they called you a month later and they just said, you know what, I've won another 20 million on the Euro Millions, you'd probably find that a bit hard to take. Once they win the lottery, I can be happy for someone else. Twice, maybe not so happy. So Rav Dessler is saying that we have to do mitzvahs, as many mitzvahs, to protect the Ayin Hara from taking its hold on us as individuals. So there is Ayin Hara, but we have protection, and that protection, as is often the case, is mitzvahs, is using what we have to do mitzvahs for others. Now, Rav Soloveitchik could have written this if he was speaking about social media and Instagram and all these wonderful, marvelous things that many of the teenagers today are absolutely struggling with beyond, and not only teenagers, many adults. If their parents are on it, then they're going to be on it, and probably if they're struggling on it, their parents are probably struggling on it as well. This is what Rav Soloveitchik writes in Shiurei Harav, writing before all of these great social media tools even existed. The matter of Ayin Hara is crystal clear to me. There are people, just listen to the genius and the insight of Rav Soloveitchik, whose lives are entirely dependent on the thoughts of others. Whether they approve of them, forget about them, or praise them. At the moment they realize that the other no longer approve of them or care about them, this immediately destroys their spiritual strength and self-confidence. How many people do we know today that this applies to? People like this see themselves exclusively from the perspective of others without recognizing their independent abilities. For people like this, the Ayin Hara can be devastating. When others gaze on them with Ayin Hara, meaning some degree of opposition or disapproval, a like here, a like there, a dislike here, a dislike there, a horrible comment, shaming, cancel culture, and all the other things, their very humanity can be totally, completely destroyed. I think this part of Rav Soloveitchik should be taken to every single teenager in the country, and maybe many adults as well, maybe people well beyond their teenagers, and try and engender a sense of our own incredible, innate holiness, spiritual greatness, the fact that we all have the Tzedem and Elohim, and nothing that anyone else can say, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or any of these, now I'm going to say what I really think, horrendous social media things, as great as they are, and the technology that we have this year on, is destroying lives. It's absolutely destroying teenagers' lives to the point that many people are taking their own lives. Our own humanity cannot ever be dependent on what other people think of us. We have to appreciate that Hashem has given us unbridled ability and potential to become incredibly great human beings. And Ayin Hara will only be able to take a hold on us if every Tom, Dick, and Harry's view of what I am or what I'm not means anything to me. If I know what I am, I know my strengths, I also know my weaknesses, but I don't care what everyone else says, then I will be able to ward off the power of Ayin Hara. Along very similar lines, Rav Kook, the famous first chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, of Israel, in his commentary on the Tractate of Brachos, writes a similar concept to Rav Soloveitchik. And I apologize, we're going through these quite quickly, but we've still got quite a lot to do. I'm not sure how much we'll get through. Alidei ma shanafashot poalot zu al zu yesh makom la'ayin hara shetifol hara. just like we know that souls have this ability to be po'el, to have an impact, to connect to those around them, so too Ayin Hara has this ability to connect and take hold and to have an impact on those around. Omnam, lo tifal, it will not have this ability, ki im al yedei chalishut hanefesh hamit apelet, only through a weakness of one's own self-worth, one's own self-esteem. This was something which Rabbi Tversky, who wrote many books with his amazing insight into the psychological element as being a psychiatrist, into human character and human behavior. It can only take a hold when there is a weakness from one's own sense of image, one's own sense of who they are, their self-worth. And as a result, the central focus of its activities are based on the external facade that meets the eye. Again, if a person is brought up and educated to realize their innate power, their innate strengths, their innate weaknesses, and they're to be worked on, but they don't think so much about everybody else's view, especially on social media. Of course, if someone is going through struggles and their parents have a few wise words of chinuch, of education, of things to say to them, of course that needs to be taken into account. You know, no one else can give us more insight than our parents. But just because one of our 3,000 friends on Facebook didn't like a comment, or someone, you know, out there on Twitter put a comment about something that I said, that should not have any impact on us. And if it doesn't, Ayin Hara has no ability and capability to implicate us in a negative way. This is all very much from the psychological element, from a psychological outlook into human character. But what about from a more purely halachic element, from a halachic angle? So Rav Moshe Feinstein, that's one of the most outstanding contemporary halachis over the last 100 years, writes, and this is perhaps where the attitude about Ayin Hara comes from, where people say, you know what, there is Ayin Hara, but I'm not going to spend my life tying strings and dressing my kids in red and wearing chamsas all over the house and all the other things that we'll see maybe later on if we have time to avoid it. Says Rav Moshe, be'inyan Ayin Hara, vada yesh lachu shaval ein lahakpid harbe ki b'dvarim haklal man deloi kopit loi kapdinam bahadei. The idea that Ayin Hara exists, as Rav Moshe, is clear. It's well documented as we see. But here's the key. Ein lahakpid harbe. Don't dray your cop crazy all day long about Ayin Hara and run your life around Ayin Hara. Right? The same way they say, don't run your life around taxes. Don't run your life around Ayin Hara. Don't spend your whole existence trying to run away from Ayin Hara. It's there, it exists. But if we're not overly concerned with it, it won't have an overly powerful impact, because when a person doesn't pay too much attention, if he's not troubled by it, it won't have that impact on him. That's from Moshe Feinstein. Now, one of the lines in the topic of the shir tonight was about red string. I'm sure everybody here, at some point in their lives, if they're privileged to have gone to the Kotel, hopefully we'll all have the privilege to go to the Kotel soon. I don't think it's so common actually anymore. I think the commercial element of red strings at the Kotel seems to have waned somewhat, but there was always at least one or two people. I can remember the first time going when I was 17, people selling red strings all over the place. Red strings, you put this on, no Ayin Hara. What's the source for it? Is it real? Is it not real? What are we to make of it? So Rav Ari Enkin, who is a friend, colleague, lives in Ramat Beit Shemesh, family friend as well. He's written a few svarim, amazing svarim on halacha bilvad, various topics within halacha. He writes the following. The Tosefta, the tractate from Shabbos, teaches us that wearing a red string is, believe it or not, you can take your red string off now, a prohibited pagan practice. In fact, the wearing of a red string was in existence and far predates any documented Jewish practice as such. It's true origins are likely from Hinduism. Any Hindus on here tonight? No? Where it is referred to as the Kabbalah, not Kabbalah, the Kalava, and is alleged to ward off evil from those who wear it. Both ancient and modern Buddhism advocates the use of the red string for protection and blessings. And guess what? The Dalai Lama himself gives them out. So if you want a red string, at least go to the Dalai Lama to get it, not the Kota. The many cultures of East Asia have also used the red string, known as the Unmei no Akai Ito in Japanese, I don't know if I said that right, attributed to a number of superstitious phenomena. According to all accounts, it is to be worn on the left hand. Even Christian associations with the red string, in which it serves as a memento of the red garment that was placed upon their prophet prior to the crucifixion. I was recently in Regent's Park with the kids on Sunday, and they were on their bikes, riding along quite far ahead of me, which is always a problem when they take their bikes. And I couldn't see them, so I started to panic and started running down the path. And they were there, and there was this black fellow giving them a whole long lecture on Jesus and Jews and what the Jews did to Jesus. Anyway, I said to the kid, quickly, get on your bikes, we need to get out of here. But apparently he wore one before the crucifixion. The wearing of a red string is also recommended according to Feng Shui practices. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, interestingly, and Rav Herschel Schachter were both against wearing them. Wearing them is a Torah violation. Now, don't worry too much, because as much as those are two enormous giants of our generation, Lahavdil, one is around today, of Herschel Schachter, should be Zolzan Gesund and Stark, been teaching Torah for over 50 years, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zatzal, two very, very prominent names. It's a Torah violation to wear them. There are, however, modern contemporary poskim, the River Voice Ephraim and Ephraim Greenblatt and the Be'er Moshe, who say that these things have been somehow passed down from generation to generation, and therefore there's nothing wrong with them. There may be no proof that they actually work, they actually do anything, but to say it's a Torah violation, that far they're not prepared to go. Now, what's interesting is the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, in his incredible work on the entire really Shas, and includes the entire Shas into a system of halacha, writes in Hilchos Shabbos, discusses a whole list of ancient practices that were done for refuah, for healing purposes. And the Rambam writes that whilst these things do not have any ability to heal, if the person on the receiving end of them is going to feel so distraught and broken and could cause him some other form of, I suppose, psychological distress, then he is not going to ban, he's not going to forbid the use of these practices, such as wearing fox teeth and all sorts of interesting other things that he goes through. There's a whole list of them. I'm not going to go through them now. But the Rambam writes, there's nothing to them. The Rambam was a philosopher, he was a lachis. He wasn't interested in any of this, what many people will term today voodoo Judaism. But at the same time, he realized that if someone is unwell and they think for some reason it's a placebo and it's going to bring them some sense of calm and menucha and tranquility, then that's okay. However, the Vilna Gaon writes strongly on the Rambam in his commentary on Shulchan Aruch, and he says the Rambam is totally wrong. How can he advocate some of this nonsense voodoo Judaism when it doesn't do anything and it's of no value, and we should be calling it out for what it is? So I think we've seen quite an interesting, as is often the case with topics like this, a variance of views, a variance of opinions, a whole range of opinions. Everyone agrees that Ayin Hara exists. Everyone agrees it's a real concept. Everyone agrees that there are things that we can do to prevent it. What those things are, according to Rav Dessler, it's making sure that we use the material things that we have for mitzvahs. According to some, such as River Ephraim and the Be'er Moshe, both also prominent halachic poskim, you can wear a red string if it makes you feel good. Whether it's actually going to do anything, probably not. And what about the chamsa? Anyone here, put your hands up if you've got a chamsa up in your house. My guess is that, okay, very good. The beanstalks have got a chamsa up in the house. So, a chamsa. So, interestingly enough, there's a book written on the very concept of the chamsa in Jewish thought by Daniel Sayani, very interesting book. And as you'll see here, it's not just Jews who use the chamsa. Christianity call it the kaf Miriam. We can imagine who Miriam is, not very difficult. Her son was a very naughty boy. In Islam, they call it the hand of Fatima, Muhammad's daughter. And so most Ashkenazi sectors of Jews are not so into the chamsa. It's more of a Sephardi type thing. And why is that? Because the Ben Ish Chai, a very, very prominent Kabbalist in Iraq, in Baghdad, writes the idea of 5 being, quoting from a section of the Talmud in Tractate of Brachas, that it has a power to protect from Ayin Hara and so forth. So according to the Sephardim, it's a much more acceptable, and even it's a nice thing. It can potentially cause any element of Ayin Hara to go away and be powerless. I don't know anyone here who is aware of a organization in Yerushalayim called Or Meyeh Uvracha. It's an amazing tzedakah, amazing charity, run by a Sephardi family, Liora and Nissim Tedji, who my parents were introduced to many years ago, and their community got involved. And they gave, basically, this was a lady who, again, as I mentioned about Rabbi Zechron Ivracha, a short lady, but an absolute spiritual giant of a person. She lost twins in, I think it was the 2009 bombing in Yerushalayim. And she said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, she said, if you bless me with twins again, and you can see Sephardim, they in some ways much more spiritual, I will dedicate the rest of my life to a charity which takes care of other victims of terror. She was on a bus and the bus blew up. I can't remember the whole story. Anyway, a year later, she was blessed with twins, and she set up, as she promised, she did a deal with Hashem. She kept her promise. She set up Or Meyeh Uvracha, which looks after terror victims. And of course, many terror victims, because of the mental and the psychological toll that they have gone through, either themselves or members of their family, their parnasa suffers terribly. So they give out food packages and they pay for people's psychiatric help and therapy and so on. And her mother is what I would term as the quintessential Sephardi, holy, spiritual lady. And many people go to her mother in Yerushalayim and they tell her, you know, their issues. And she has this whole ceremony. I haven't done it myself, but I've spoken to people who do. And she has this process where she removes Ayin Hara. And all I can say is, be careful before you go. She's the sort of person that I think when she looks at you and she looks at your hand, she knows all the bad things that you've done, and she can see straight into your neshama. And if you've been a good boy or a good girl, all is well. And if not, she can see. And she has this, and very, very eerie, airy, fairy, some would say. But, you know, people go to her on a regular basis, and they don't do it for money. They're not a family who are using this as a business, as many people do. And it's clearly something which in the Sephardi world is, and the Kabbalistic world, is something which is far more prominent. We're running out of time. But what I just wanted to really, the last couple of minutes, was to really focus on this idea of Voodoo Judaism. Today, there is this, dare I say it, this very dangerous route that many people fall into, whether it's religious Jews, irreligious Jews, of finding segulas, finding things which supposedly will result in tremendous results. You know, if someone told you if you invest £100 and you'll see £1,000 next year, you'd all be straight in there. So spiritually, there are things that people connect to, and they think, wow, if I say the tefillah hashla, the shlah's tefillah for children, then it's a guarantee that your children will be righteous, upstanding members of society. If you say Parashas Hamon, the Pesukim about the Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar, and everyone received what they needed, then you'll have all your parnasa challenges will be taken care of. Of course, Shulchan Aruch says that we should say that as part of our daily tefillah as well. Putting keys in challahs Schlissel Challah, lots of things where I don't know what everyone else feels about this, but I think it's nice, but it's a dangerous approach to take because Yiddishkeit is about growth and it's about opportunities for growth. And there's no such thing as a quick fix. Two of the greatest opportunities for growth and development are within marriage and then chinuch, bringing up children. Those two key stages of life are where the biggest challenges are to our personalities and what we have to do to work on ourselves and ultimately come closer to our Kadosh Baruch Hu. But selling red strings to people and telling them to stick keys in their challahs and all the other voodoo type practices, I'm not saying they're totally without source, but let's not lose focus. Let's not lose the real emphasis has to be on character development, who we are as becoming spiritually great people, both in Adam Mechaberoi, man to man, and man to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if you want to do those things on the side, it's very nice, it's lovely, but that's not the key of what Yiddishkeit is all about. So just to summarize, Ayin Hara is clearly very well documented. You can look at it in many sources that we've seen tonight, and there's hundreds more. We can build on our own sense of self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem. And according to Rav Kook, Rav Soloveitchik, and others, Rav Moshe Feinstein, it cannot be sholet, it cannot take hold on people who have a strong sense of self-worth. And social media is definitely not helping with a lot of that today. According to Rav Dessa, we can help control Ayin Hara by doing mitzvahs, by using the material blessings that we have to build up more zechuyas, more merits. And if you want to wear a red string, according to some, it's a Torah violation. According to others, there's nothing wrong with it. If you want to have a chamser up in your house, it's fine according to Kabbalistically orientated Jews, Sephardic Jews, the Ben Ish Chai, Ashkenazim are not so keen on it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining. And hopefully it's been somewhat interesting. And thank you again to Susan and to Naomi for, I can't really express how incredible it is, 23 years of having one share going. When we're all zoomed out and people are still coming on, a big yesher koach to you. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Portnoy. A really excellent, fascinating, and really thoughtful analysis of Ayin Hara, giving us so much practical help and guidance on how to avoid it. And thank you also for all your help throughout the series, which we really appreciate. Next week, Rabbi Dr. Moshe Friedman will be speaking on Secrets of Redemption in Megillas Rus. If anyone wants to make a dedication for any week, please let me know or Naomi Landy know. And thank you very much all for joining. I look forward to seeing you next Sunday at 8:30. Thank you again, Rabbi Portnoy. Has anyone got any questions?
Thank you.
And you can see all the thanks on the chat, so thank you. Okay, if we don't have any questions, I wish everyone good night. And thank you again.
Amazing. Thank you so much. A lot of food for thought. And thanks, girls, for organising it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.